this is Anna from the Bajo Moton, and this is Knitting 101 Lesson 5. Now in Lessons 3 and 4 you've learned the very basics, how to cast on and how to make the knit and the purl stitches. And in Lesson 4 we actually saw how the combination of these two can make two different fabrics, the garter stitch fabric and the stockinette. But there are a few other variations that you can make with just combining those two stitches without any manipulation. And these different stitches will help you add texture and even shape to your fabric. So we're going to learn two types of ribbing and then what we call seed stitch. And get your needles and let's get started. So the first knit-purl combination is obviously stockinette stitch, which you sort of saw in the previous lesson, and it's simply alternating one full row of knits and one full row of purls on the wrong side. Okay, but I want to show you how to make some ribbing, which is a very easy stitch and it's something that you're going to find useful. It's also called elastic because it is elastic and it adds shape. You'll see once we have a few rows how it shapes your piece. So we're going to start with 2 by 2 ribbing, which means 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches, 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches. Obviously you need an even number of stitches, and since we have 10, we're okay. So let's knit the first 2 as you learned in the previous lesson. And now since we're going to purl, we need to hold everything and just bring the yarn to the front. You're basically wrapping like you always wrap it to make a stitch, but you're not making any stitches. You're just bringing it to the front so you can purl the next stitch and hold everything with your index finger as we did in the previous lesson. And now again, you've purled 2, so the yarn needs to go to the back to knit the next 2. And now again to the front, hold everything, bring it to the front and purl. And now the last 2 will be knit stitches. There you go. So now you can see how it looks different, and in fact your stitches are in little sets of 2. They have a little separation in the middle, and when you turn it, now if you finished with knit stitches, what you're going to get now when you do ribbing is you're going to get columns. So you're going to get 1 column of stockinette stitch, 1 column of stockinette stitch, but on the wrong side. So on the back, on this side, it's going to look like this, and you'll see it in a minute. But just make sure that the stitches that you knit on the front get purled in the back and vice versa. So now we're gonna purl the first 2 instead of knit them. Now yarn to the back, and you can just leave your needle there if it helps you keep everything in place and just get it out of the way later. And now knit, yarn to the front, purl 2 stitches, yarn to the back, yarn to the front, purl the last 2, and you can sort of start seeing the pattern. So let's do the same. Here in the front you can see it more clearly. So let's do a few more rows. Now you want to knit the stitches that you just purled, okay? Just remember that. But I think it's becoming clear now. These are knit stitches, purl, knit, purl, and knit. there's your ribbing, and as you can see, it is elastic. Work a few more rows so you can really get a sense of the rhythm of moving your yarn back and forth, back and forth. So before you do single ribbing, just knit a couple of rows so you have a little transition of garter stitch, otherwise you're going to get a little confused. Sort of a clean slate. And now you're just going to do the same, but instead of alternating every two, it's going to be every other stitch. And it will be, as you will see, you can clearly see how much this is pulling in. This is your stockinette, and this is your double ribbing, and it's already pulling in quite a bit. And you'll see that single ribbing doesn't pull in as much. Doesn't give you as much elasticity. So again, just wrap your yarn, get it ready, and you're just going to knit one and bring the yarn over to the front, purl one. So it's good to start practicing with the 2x2 ribbing to get a little bit of a hang of that rhythm, because it can get a little complicated, and it's not complicated, but it's a lot of back and forth with your yarn. So you want to be paying attention to that. Back. Now we're knitting, front, purl, back, knit, front, purl. And it's just a good exercise to do to become familiar with your knit and purl stitches, and get more used to using them in the same row. All right, so now as usual, you just turn your work, and as with double ribbing or 2x2 ribbing, if you purled the last stitch, you need to knit it. And you can see that this is a knit stitch, so it's kind of telling you what to do. Now fourth, purl, go back, knit, front, purl. So pay attention to your stitches, because you can see knit, see how it makes a little V and it lays flatter, and your purl stitch has a little bump. It's like it's wearing a scarf, and it's bumpy as opposed to the flat V. And this is also called knitting your stitches as they come. So the purl stitch is purled, and the knit stitch is knit. And that will save you a lot of confusion. You don't have to be counting all the time. Just pay attention. You count, once you've counted the first row and you've paid attention to that, you can just look at your stitches and you'll be able to figure it out. Okay, and it's starting to show up. So let's do this a few more rows, make 4, 6 more rows, and then I'll show you one last combination. So just as we did before, just knit a couple of rows so you get a little separation of garter stitch so you don't get confused. And seed stitch is just knitting one and purling one and knitting one, purling one, and then in the back, so I've done a couple of rows here just to show you, and in the back the only difference is that instead of knitting as they come, here you can see again, here's your knit stitch with the little V-neck, and here's your purl stitch with the little scarf. And when we were doing ribbing, we were knitting and purling, knitting and purling. And now we're going to do the opposite, because we want to get this little bumpy stitch instead of the rows. So now the V-neck is going to get purled. And the little scarf, see how sometimes it's easier to bring your yarn to the back before you pull your other needle out. And now your little bump, your little scarf is going to be knitted. Yarn to the front, your little V-neck is going to be purled. knit your scarf and purl your v-neck, and you'll get this really pretty flat stitch that makes very nice borders on hats and even cuffs and button plackets. Use your scarf and you're going to knit it. Bring your yarn to the front, purl, knit, purl, and knit. And there is your nice, and you can see how nice and textured it is and how simple it is to make. Well, now that you've learned to combine your stitches a little bit and you're hopefully more comfortable knitting and purling, we're going to go one step further over the next 2 lessons. So I'll see you in lesson 6, where I will teach you how to increase your stitches.